Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sarah McDonald from Life Science Cares, and it is my honor to invite you to our fourth installment of From the Frontlines, a new series of programs Life Science Cares has started to help showcase what our nonprofit partners are doing every day to respond in this new world of COVID-19. Today, we have the good fortune of being able to welcome our good friends from Sanofi Genzyme and from the Wily Network to talk a bit about why and how they all are responding. A couple of housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded and we will share after the fact with the Life Science Cares Network. And if you have questions for Judy or the folks from Wily Network, please use the Q&A function in the chat in the Zoom box, and Christine Castellini from Life Science Cares will play MC if we have time for questions at the end. It is my honor to introduce Steve Munir from Sanofi Genzyme to talk a little bit about what they have done in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and why they give back in the community. Steve?
Great. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining today and the opportunity to spend a few minutes talking. So my name is Steve Munir. I work in patient advocacy at Sanofi Genzyme, and I'm joining you today to speak primarily about our community relations program, because this is a program I've worked with my 8 years at the company and been able to see the great work that gets done. And we have luckily just hired Wendy Richard, who will be heading this program. So all of you that want to talk with her, follow her up after this call and you can talk to her about the program. But I just want to give you a sense from Sanofi Genzyme and really from a biopharma company, what we've been doing during this crisis, and particularly the work we've been able to participate and see our nonprofit partners doing. So I kind of look at it, you know, we've all been going through so much lately, and I know like everyone, you're trying to do your work and I have kids banging on my door and everything else that's going on. So I try and look both in my personal life and professional life, what are the great things? What are the things that during all of this have surprised you and just inspired you? So I look at three areas from a professional standpoint. Most of my personal things are about baking bread and pizzas with my kids, so I don't think you care too much about that. But working for a company like Sanofi, I've been able to see, one, how quickly we've been able to mobilize to try and end this crisis. So as a company, we're working on 2 vaccines, 2 treatments, and a diagnostic tool. And what really inspires me about that is not that we're working on those, but the people that are doing that work. Because during a crisis like this, a lot of our employees can't work from home. They're in a lab, they're in manufacturing. And as much as we're trying to solve for this problem now, we also have people every day that need medicine. So, you know, for those of you in Boston, when you drive by our manufacturing site in Alston, think about that plant is running 24 hours a day to make a drug for a rare disease called Gaucher's disease. And without that plant running, that medicine doesn't get to the people that need it. So I'm thankful for my colleagues that have gone into work every day with that stress to be able to provide for patients and hopefully discover something that helps us out of this crisis. Secondly, in the work I do with patient advocacy groups, it's been great to see how these organizations that are nonprofits focused on patients have been able to really work to provide information and resources to patients in need. One of my favorite stories is one of our respiratory groups was able to produce an infographic about what you need to know about COVID if you have asthma, for example. And they put this up on Facebook and LinkedIn, and it was so effective and so many patients were using it that the CDC actually pointed patients towards this infographic that one of our nonprofit partners put out. And lastly, for our community relations, this is something I think is the proudest part of what I get to do at Sanofi. This is a program that goes back 30 years in Boston, started when we were Genzyme. And so we have nonprofit partners in Boston, Cambridge, and Metro West that we've been working with for 25, 30 years. So I think when this crisis hit, we were thinking as a company, what can we do to help those in need? And frankly, the first thing we did was send a check over to Sarah and Life Science Cares, because we knew it would be it would get to the right people and it would get there quickly. And then we thought about how else can we help our nonprofit partners. And for our program, we work with about 90 nonprofits in the Boston area, primarily working in STEM education, access to medicine, and critical community need. And so when we took a step back and said, those are three areas that are going to be in most need. So everything from our nonprofit partners on the front line, from the Dimmick Center to Boston Healthcare for the homeless, but our education programs, I can't think of a more important time to have robust STEM programs and extracurricular programs and tutoring programs with kids that are going to be struggling to keep up with their studies, and particularly critical community need. A program like Operation Warmth that provides coats to children in Boston. We can, no matter what, we know it's going to be cold next winter, and those needs are still there. So what we're doing is we're focusing on those groups that we have partnerships with, make sure they have the resources to fulfill their mission. So we're committing our $2 million a year that we'll be spending here on those groups to make sure that they can continue to drive their mission. So that's from our perspective what we've been able to do as a company, and again, from what I've been able to see is makes me a little more hopeful at the end of the day than usually when I wake up. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk here today. Thanks, Sarah. With that, I want to introduce Judy from the Wily Network to talk about their work.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I'm going to talk about Life Science Cares in a minute. So I'm going to start. Can you put up our first slide? I don't know, sir. Thank you. So I am the executive director of the Wily Network. At the Wily Network, we work with promising students college students who are experiencing some really serious life challenges, such as homelessness, foster care. They may have parents who are deceased, dealing with addiction or mental health issues or incarceration. And they are often invisible on their campuses because there is this myth that if you get to college, that you've made it, that you've broken the cycle, that you've crossed into sort of the promised land, when in fact our students arrive at college and it's really challenging from the moment that they move in to their dorm by themselves. Can you do the next slide, please? So this was the Wily Network then, when we all gathered together for our community day. And at the time when the COVID crisis hit, we still have 55 scholars at 11 colleges. And we used to get together like this, where there was a lot of physical interaction, a lot of communication, and we worked together to build a community, what we call a pack. What we do at the Wily Network is we work with students in three aspects of our programming. The first is what we call clinical coaching. This is a group of people who are trained to work with people who have experienced trauma. All just by the very nature of the situations that our students live in through no fault of their own, they have experienced pretty serious trauma. And that makes it really complicated to navigate and take advantage of all that college has to offer. Our goal is to help them to just be focused on being students. And what happens is the coaches go to the colleges every week and meet with the students one-on-one to really talk about whatever it is that they need help with. The second thing that we do is supplemental financial assistance. We provide students with a stipend every month, a small stipend, pizza money. They don't have to account for it. But we also get them computers, phones, make sure they have their books, the clothing that they need. If you think about it, if you arrive at college on your own, there's not really anyone to get you your dorm set up. So we make sure that they have everything that they might need for their dorms. The third thing we do is community building and networking. As you can see from this slide, we try to build a pack where they can be with other students who have similar stories to theirs and have similar career aspirations to their own. and they can rely on each other. And the other thing we do is networking, where we try and help students to meet as many people as they can, because they don't have the social capital that most college students do to help them get internships and jobs, those sorts of things. So that was where things were at on March 13th. And if you could change the slide, please. And this is where we are now. We have moved all of our programming to virtual programming. We've done everything we can, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, to help students deal with the social isolation that they're experiencing now that they're really on their own, trying not to interact with other people, remote learning, and all the complications and worries that come along with that. The next slide, please. So, I'm sorry, it went to, excuse me for a minute. I lost my notes. I might just have to wing this. Okay, so what we did when things went awry is we assessed, we pivoted, and we hustled. And I have to say that Life Science Cares partnered with us in every aspect of this. We had a few organizations that offered to support us and work with us around how to manage all of this. But the best match for us was Life Science Cares, and it started with these Friday morning conversations with other nonprofits where we could learn about a topic and share ideas. And we watched them assess what we needed. They pivoted, and they have been working so hard. It is unbelievable. We were just talking earlier about how we have all simultaneously stopped in our tracks and at the same time moved as fast as we can. And that seems to be what Life Science Cares has been doing for us. And one of the things I noticed, that these three tenets of Life Science Cares of survival, education, and sustainability are similar to what Wily's goals are. We're really working with young people who are just trying to survive, and we're really trying to help them to thrive in terms of their education, and then really become independent, competent adults. I wanted to share that, and now I'll tell you about our own assessing, pivoting, and hustling. Next slide, please. So, in terms of assessing, when we got an inkling of this happening, we contacted every college to say, our students have no place to go. I want to backtrack a minute, sorry, since I lost my notes. You know, one of the things that I've been trying to do for years is to explain to people what it means to be a Wily Scholar. And what I often say is, if that scholar got the measles and the school told them they had to leave campus for 2 weeks, where would they go? Well, we could never have imagined that 55 scholars were all going to be told to go home on the same day, in the same moment. It was the moment of our mission. It was a proof of concept that no one ever really needed. But all of a sudden, we knew we were going to have 55 students asked to leave their campuses. So the first thing we did was call the schools to see if they would make some exceptions. And almost every school would, but you had to fill out a form saying why you needed to stay. So knowing that students really didn't want to have to discuss their personal information, we asked schools if they could just say that they were a Wily Scholar and if that would be sufficient. And in fact, it was. And so that was really effective. Unfortunately, the messaging was overpowering, and there were so many emails saying you need to leave and you need to leave now, and dates changing, and watching all of their friends just pick up and leave with a home to go to. It became really complicated. So not all of the students stayed on campus like we had hoped they would. So the first thing we did was we assessed the needs of the scholars. Oh, I see a typo in our presentation. The needs of the scholars and their health. The second thing we looked at was the financial health of the agency, our staff's ability to work safely, and then our connections with each college. We had to make sure that we were going to be able to work with them around housing and around food security. Next slide, please. So then we pivoted. We put everything online. The gatherings, the Wednesday, our staff spend all day together planning for the next week. All of that moved online. All of the coaching moved online. We now communicate, we video chat, we talk on the phone, we text. We still try to be there for students 24 hours a day. And we've actually increased the number of times we talk to a student each week, or at least we offer it, just to help them feel more connected. We continue to try and meet the scholar needs, but the scholar needs were very different now. There was a lot about feeling isolated. We set up virtual dinners where they could order dinner from Uber Eats and we would all eat dinner together. We've had trivia nights. And then the last thing we needed to do was to raise money, because we knew that we were going to incur a huge amount of money, particularly around food insecurity at first, and then this summer around housing insecurity. So we set up 2 campaigns, and this will probably move into a third campaign. The first campaign was all around individual donors, and we raised $200,000 to get us through the first 100 days. And then the second campaign, we're looking to foundations and corporations to fund another $200,000 for housing and food security for the summer. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did, well, we thought might happen and is actually happening, is that some of the schools are actually closing their dorms to all people for the summer. So we have a group of students who were already thrown into a tizzy because somebody said go home, and it wasn't really apparent to them what home meant, because they had arrived at college thinking that was going to be their home for the next 4 years, and they were blindsided. So the students that were told just before exams that they needed to find alternative housing really panicked. And some made decisions and made commitments to apartments that were actually not even livable before we could get to them. And so we've really been working with students who have never had an apartment before to find a sublet, to secure that sublet without a cosigner. And we're working around that by Wily offers to pay extra rent in lieu of a cosigner. And then that way we're not accepting any liability, but the students are able to secure the housing. Food security, sometimes money is the answer. And Life Science Cares offered us a pretty creative way for us to get the students 1 meal a day. And that was free through a program called Hunger Not Impossible. And we're working on that. And then other than that, we just pay for the meals when students can't get them. Jobs and internships. Students have had jobs rescinded. Some students hadn't gotten jobs yet. So we're working really hard with them to find either a paid or an unpaid internship for the summer so that they can feel like they are moving forward. I think one of the most compelling aspects of this was students who fled school because they were told to go home and really couldn't wait till things were sorted out for them to stay, and made decisions to live in places that were temporary, doing couch surfing, or unsafe or insecure, and we've had to help students to come back to school with very little notice, or come back to Boston. And an example of that is 2 Thursdays ago, a student was living with a distant relative who said, you have to leave here within the next 24 hours. So we had to get that student back to Boston, find a hotel for them, and fortunately their school did allow them to go back to school after a few days in the hotel. And then we have graduation plans. I think everybody can see there are a lot of presents behind me, beautifully wrapped. And we had hoped to have a graduation party on April 3rd. That didn't happen. So we're going to be having a virtual graduation party. And we're going to be sending them all these gifts, and hopefully they won't open them before the party. But for graduates, this is really a big deal. Where do they go? What if their job offers are rescinded? So Wily has committed to changing our plan of when students graduate, we usually work with them for 3 more months, but now we're going to commit to stay with them until they get a job. And we won't take on new students until the graduates are actually settled wherever they're going to be. And then the final hustle is fundraising right now. We're working really hard to raise the money that we need to just support the students to help them through whatever comes next. Next slide, please. So here are our challenges, and here's how you can help. It's a challenge to meet everybody's needs. It's a big difference when you feel like somebody needs a hug at the end of a meeting, and not only can you not give them a hug, you can't even be in the same room as they are. It's hard to help them to problem solve around the issues that they're having with their schoolwork, or to sit with them while they're trying to figure out what jobs to apply for. All those kinds of things we're so used to dealing with in person that it's really made it a challenge. If a student gets sick, we have our first student who's sick and in isolation, and that's really complicated because we can't go help them in this situation. Finding all of our in-person ways that we got people to get people to donate, typically, that has to be reevaluated, and now we're moving into more virtual types of fundraising. Housing support has also really been a challenge. We're asking people who have never rented apartments to rent apartments without ever even seeing them. And the unknown, I think that's our biggest challenge right now, is that we can't plan for the fall. We don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to start early and go till October? Are they going to be remote? And so the anxiety of the unknown is really challenging for our scholars, but it's just as challenging for us. How can you help? Well, the first way you could help is by going to our volunteer page and signing up to be a networker. And you can sign up for other things too, but we are setting up career conversations to meet one-on-one with a student, to go over their resume, to talk to them and problem solve about what kind of work they might want to go into. That conversation may be a one-time conversation, and it could be an ongoing conversation depending on how you hit it off. Donate. We always want you to donate. That really helps. We can send that directly to the students. Housing support. If you know of a hotel that would donate rooms to us, we can always use them. We're always needing to put students up. Not always. We often need students to put students up for a day or two. And then the last thing is gift cards. It's easiest for our students to order things through Uber Eats, Target, Amazon, all the major gift card vendors. you can just send them into our office. We will redistribute them to the students. I want to give a little shout out to our partner. If you look at that picture from Hope, we distribute personal hygiene items to students through care packages, and those items were put together by Hope and Comfort, another grantee of Life Science Cares, and we really appreciate them partnering with us so that we don't have the expense of having to buy those things for scholars. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks for sharing all of that. And for folks who are interested in being able to support the Wily Network, you can visit lifesciencecares.org and click through to our COVID-19 response directory. We have sign up moving forward if you're interested in being connected with Wiley students and other career conversations moving forward. Christine, I see you have popped on. Do we have a quick question for Judy?
I personally have a question. So since there are none yet from the attendees, I was just wondering, how are the students doing? What's their mood? How are they adjusting to this? Are they hopeful? Are they bummed out? Talk to me about their emotional state.
I think for the most part, the emotional state is tough. We see that in the response to our virtual activities, which are very well attended. And I think they're longing for connection. One of our greatest fears for our students is that it was very hard for them to come to college in the first place. And they have a high rate of dropping out or stopping out, as it's now called. And we're really worried that they're going to feel like they can't go on. And so that's why we're increasing the touch points. I think one of the most challenging parts of this is that the housing has changed. At first, they thought they could stay at school. Then some schools have changed that and they have to leave school. And that has been the message that I've heard most from students, is that they can't, they were so counting on getting to college and having stable housing for the first time in their lives for 4 years and planning to stay there over the summers, and to have that taken away really just pulled the rug out from under them. And so that puts into question the sustainability of them going to school. So we're trying, I mean, they have continued to come to coaching sessions. They're really participating, and we're hoping that will sustain them just until they can start to have a little more freedom.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Judy. Since we are getting close to 3:30, I will thank you and thank your staff, certainly, for everything you're doing to assess, pivot, and hustle in this crazy time. You know, for better, for worse, I am surrounded by my family 24/7, but right now that feels like a blessing. So thank you for continuing to be a lifeline for students who don't have that kind of built-in support network. We really appreciate it. For folks who are paying attention to Life Science Care's ongoing efforts and want to get involved, if you haven't already, check out our website and take a look at what we're doing specifically to respond to the impacts of COVID-19. We have launched a fundraising effort, and thanks to generosity from Santa Fe Genzyme and many other companies, have been able to collect $1.7 million. We have granted about $850,000 of that out into the community and meet weekly to continue to fund critical needs. And so we appreciate any contribution you can consider. We also continue to try and engage your hearts and your minds. So take a look at the various wish lists or virtual volunteer opportunities we have. It's updated on an ongoing basis, and we continue to serve with our partners, alongside our partners, to really understand how they can use our industry, our time, our talent, as this completely unknown situation unfolds. So stay connected, stay tuned. Our next From the Frontlines conversation will be 2 weeks from today, May 21st, and we're really looking forward to seeing many of you then. Thanks, Judy, and thanks to Steve, who, yay, is back on. I cut off his video at one point because I couldn't get it to not show him. But thanks, Steve, and your team for all of your support. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.